Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Not sure when you're listening, where you're listening. Just glad that you are. I'm John Buzby. He's Marty Sheehan, and we are talking football and playoff football. And this is the podcast for the Class 1A playoffs. If you're looking for two or three, that podcast is dropped as well. Just look for it on the title wherever you get your podcast. We decided to split it up, thinking it made more sense since most of you are following, if not one team, a group of teams in the same class, possibly. Or again, if you're following all three, you have the chance to listen to all three. So that's great. So we're going to work through the class three, the first round playoff, or class one, excuse me, first round of the playoffs. And before we do that, I'm going to talk about unified sports real quick. And what unified sports is, it's people with and without disabilities playing on the same team. They do it in flag football, they do it in basketball, and they do it in track and field. Sponsored by the DIAA in partnership with Special Olympics Delaware. It's an official DIAA sport. They will play on state championship Saturday, just like everybody else at Delaware Stadium. Cape Henlopen and William Penn this Tuesday, November 15th. It's a play-in game. 9 teams in the playoffs. So there's a play-in game to get to the quarterfinals. And then the quarterfinals are on November 29th. Newark Charter plays against Cape Henlopen or William Penn. Whichever team wins, they're the number 1 seed, Newark Charter. Number 4, McCain plays number 5, Mount Pleasant. Number 3, Appoquinimink plays number 6, Middletown. Number 2, Caesar Rodney plays at Smyrna, or excuse me, against Smyrna at Caesar Rodney. And so if you're a fan of football, you'll be a fan of flag football. Trust me, Marty, right? Isn't that the case?
It's a lot of fun. These kids go at it 110%. And they won state championships just as much as anyone else. I'm hoping in years past, the NFHS network, powered by 302 Sports, has been televising, and I hope they're going to do it again this year, because if you're not at the game, it's 10:30 in the morning, and it's a lot of fun to watch. And one thing we can guarantee this year is there will be a new champion, because
right.
Dover, last year's champion, is not in this tournament. So it should be a wide open tournament, and I know Smyrna is always up there, so it should be a lot of fun.
So again, check out the schedule. Even if it's not your school, do yourself a favor. Go to one of the games. As you heard, they're located across the state. So make the time to go out one. They last about an hour and a half, and it's a great time. Great to see that type of competition there. All right. Second thing we're going to tell you is about the ticket policies. And this is if you are going to a game, no matter where you're going to a game, whether it's class 1, 2, or 3, you want to make sure you find out what the ticket policies are. They could be the same as they were in the regular season at that stadium, or they might be different. Again, these are all DIAA games now hosted by these schools. And so the schools are going to be working with the DIAA to develop the ticket policies, whether it's cash at the door, online only, have to be sold ahead of time in schools, or whatever that is. So don't assume something. Just make sure that you find out what the ticket policy is for the game that you plan to attend. And so that's one of the most important things we can tell you. Next important thing we can tell you is if you want to, your kid is in one of these games and you want to get their picture taken, Andre Smith of Andre L Photography, that's AndreELphotography.com. He's the man you want to get behind the lens. He takes unbelievable photos. He's a professional photographer, does it for a lot of news and media agencies, kind of branched out on his own here as a freelancer. He sent me some stuff that of my son Riley playing goalie, just because he happened to be at one of the games he was doing for somebody else. And I can tell you, my wife was in awe of the difference of the pictures of that compared to what we're taking with our phones. And so do yourself a favor, whether it's this year in football playoffs, another playoff over the winter season, spring season, if you want to get quality pictures of your child in action, we all want our kids in the news journal. And when they're in the news journal or the Delaware State News, it's done by a professional photographer. But you can be guaranteed to get that level of professional photography if you hire AndreELphotography.com. So go to his website, AndreELphotography.com, and check it out. You won't regret it. Trust me. All right. Class 1A, Marty. Here we go. Let's start. We're going to start like we have at the top of the bracket. Now, these guys are vying for state championships, and they're going to be just as proud. I come from a state in New Jersey. Marty, you're from Delaware.
Mm-hmm.
I come from New Jersey, where there's 5 groups. Small schools are 1, 4 schools are the biggest. 5th group, group 5, private schools only. So they've separated that out. So I'm coming from, and I was a big proponent of this class 3 system, knowing that some of these class 1 teams were going to be, they're teams that wouldn't be in the top 10 of Division 1 or 2. Some of them would be, don't get me wrong, but some of them wouldn't be. But the reality of it is they're playing in a system against other teams where they belong, both in the size of their school, the size of the people that come out for the sport, etc. So trust me, just as legitimate winning a state championship in Class 1 as it is in Class 3. That's
you know
from a
what?
Jersey boy who was in Class 2 his entire life over in South Jersey.
And I did a big mea culpa on this because I did not like the Class 3 system, until last year when I saw how this played out and how much fun it was and how much pride it restored to the school and their sports programs, and just the overall culture of these schools seems to improve. It's a lot of fun. And again, this is not, you look at Class 3 and you say these guys are good. You look at Class 1, there's not a lot of difference in talent level. Some of the top guys down here, it's a lot. It's very good football. Don't be put off by the 1A, the 2A, the 3A. This is very good football.
And the first game we're going to talk about, number 1 Laurel versus number 8 St. Andrews. That Laurel team, they'd be in the playoffs in Class 2, and they might be have a bye in Class 2.
This will not be very good football.
This first game, defending state champs, 10-0. They blew every team out. I went through their schedule. The closest game they had was 24 points. They won by 24 points over Sussex Tech, which is a Class 2 team. Joey Jones has that town on fire. And Laurel, I went through Laurel the other day, Marty. I actually not went through. I stopped. I had an event at Laurel Elementary for Special Olympics. That's always been one of my favorite small towns. They've got that little bridge over, I don't know what body of water it is. And I say body of water, I could jump across it practically, but there's a bridge across it. And it's just one of my favorite small towns, and they get behind their sport. We had this little Special Olympics event, Marty. There were like 50 kids in it. I had 80 parents there. I had the superintendent there. It was just an unbelievable turnout. That's what small town Laurel is all about. And they've got this football team, and that's their life in the fall, is going to football on Friday nights. And they're going to host St. Andrews, which comes in at 4-6. This is a St. Andrews team that made the playoffs for the first time in school history last year, only because of this new class system. And this is one of the great things about it. And so they're in the playoffs again. They don't have any wins against playoff teams out of those 4. They've lost 3 out of the 4 at the end of the season, so they're struggling here at the end. But Pat Moffitt's going to have his team ready to play. And you talk about a team, I wouldn't be surprised if St. Andrews doesn't rent buses to take that middle school team. They've got 300 students, I think, in the school. I wouldn't be surprised if all 300 of them are on the bus. And it'll probably be one of those things that, you know what, folks, this is what we're doing on Friday night. Not do you want to do it? This is what we're doing. We're getting on the bus and going. I don't know if that's going to happen, but it potentially could. And between that and the Laurel fan base, which you know is going to be out in throngs, it's going to be a big game. Whether it's an exciting game or not remains to be seen.
This is probably, of all the first round mashups across all 3 classes, this is the biggest David versus Goliath. St. Andrews has given up 50 points to St. Elizabeth's, 55 points to Tatnall. Laurel is beating teams by an average of 45-6, as you pointed out. Last year, they ran through the 3 games of the playoffs, 110-14. The first 2 games were shutouts. St. Elizabeth scored the 14 points. They are, this year, their quality wins, I would count as Odessa, Seaford, Indian River, and Delmar. They've outscored those 4 teams 180-39. This is probably going to get this is most likely to be a running clock at the beginning of the second half. St. Andrews won saving grace. Now, and we should say St. Andrews did make the playoffs last year. They had some very good athletes. They all graduated. Now, I'm not saying they don't have good athletes now, but they're young. They're not seasoned enough to be on the same field as Laurel. It wouldn't surprise me, put it this way, Laurel can start slow sometimes. They may start slow here because it's St. Andrews. Maybe they're overlooking them. Who knows? But it won't stay that way. Joey Jones and his kids are too talented, and they certainly see a second ring in their future. Caden Shockley, Kyle Wilson are the 2 main weapons. Kyle Wilson does a little bit of everything. He has a running touchdown, passing touchdown, punt return for a touchdown. Caden Shockley can throw it. He can run it. Their defense is absolutely phenomenal. Again, they're averaging giving up 6 points a game. Laurel, if you were a betting man, this would be one where you'd probably bet the house on Laurel. and I hope St. Andrews hangs in for their sake. But this is an uphill battle.
David versus Goliath, classic. Yes. And as you said, out of the 3 classes, this might be the most case where this is the case. You know. And so anyway, so wait and see. So the winner of that will take on the winner of Odessa Tatnall, number 4, number 5. Odessa might be their last year in Class 1. The football committee is going to reorganize the classes a little bit. Not sure how much reorganization will take place, but if you're looking for a team to go up, a lot of people say, well, of course, Laurel's going to be the one to go up. Well, don't think so, not, necessarily. Don't make that automatic. Remember, Laurel's a school that's not going to grow. Laurel is what Laurel is, and they've had a good couple of years here. But as we saw with Howard, you can have a good couple of years, and then all of a sudden you fall down. Everybody screamed Howard should be in Class 3, and then you go 5-5 and don't make it to the champions. That type of thing. So same thing with Laurel. Laurel could be 5-5 next year without looking deeply at the roster. I don't know. Odessa's only going to get bigger. They don't have any seniors yet. Next year they bring in a whole new freshman class, so that adds 400, 500 people to their school. Eventually they will be Class 3. It's a question of how quickly that happens. So regardless, they're 5-5 this year. They've got 2 quality wins against what I consider it a quality win if you beat a playoff team. They beat Indian River. They beat Seafers. 4 of their losses, Marty, were to Class 2 teams. They played up and lost. So that's another positive. Their losses, those 4 of those 5 losses are against Class 2 teams that they didn't have to schedule, didn't have to play, and yet they did. So Dan Pritchard's, he's already getting his team with the mentality of that, here's the next level, folks, and this is probably where we're headed very quickly. Tatnall 5-5. Their 1 quality win is against St. Andrews, a playoff team, but their 2 losses, another positive thing here, were by 6 points or less. So 2 of those 5 losses could have easily been wins, and all of a sudden you're 7-3 and 5-5. All 5 of their losses are to playoff teams. Avery McMullen has this team playing well. Remember, this is the team that last year lost their first several games and then went on a run and got into the playoffs. And so they've got playoff experience, as does Odessa. And so this is your typical 4 versus 5. Could go either way. It's going to be played at Odessa. I can't remember whether they played their playoff game last year at home or not. If not, this will be the first playoff game ever held at the Odessa complex. And if you haven't seen that complex yet, Marty, you need to go and check it out. It's like a community college. It's better than a lot of community college athletic complexes that I've seen. So
you know what?
Number 4 versus number 5, going to be a good one.
It's even better than their first home playoff game. This is the first home playoff game in any sport for Odessa.
Oh, perfect.
They put it on Twitter this afternoon, so they are very hyped about this, and with good reason. I mean, last year they were 3-7 with only freshmen and sophomores. This year they're up to 5-5 with juniors. They're heading on the right track. They finished 5-1 in the class. As you said, they're playing really well. Quarterback J.C. Alley, who I believe transferred from AI. 370 yards, 2 touchdowns. They don't throw a lot. Azir Bellamy's their big guy on the ground, 515 yards, 9 touchdowns. Isaiah Melton and Anai Burney Green is their big defensive players. I think Green has 5 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries. He has a punt return for a touchdown. They're struggling a little bit at the end here. They lost. I really expected them to look good against Sussex Tech, and in the beginning they did. And they kind of lost control of the game, and it got away from them. Sussex Tech won the game. Now, again, Sussex Tech is a level up, but I really thought Odessa would hang in there. But for the most part, this feels like a toss-up. As you said, Avery McMullen at Tatnall has done a phenomenal job. Their average score, they're beating teams 27-24. The quality win, as you said, over St. Andrews. And the losses are kind of interesting. They started the season with losses to Archmere, Friends, and St. Elizabeth's, 112-0. So they've come a long way. They're starting to put together some wins. This is one of my favorite first-round matchups because it's 2 schools. Odessa is brand new. As we said, within 5-6 years, Odessa is going to be a Class 3 team, and they're going to be competing with guys up there for a playoff spot. Tatnall is one of those teams that has been revitalized because of the 3-class system. And Avery McMullen, I believe they're still the only staff in Delaware. Every one of their assistant coaches has college football playing experience.
Oh, wow.
So they've got a really good staff up there. And I love this matchup because it really is a toss-up. You've got 2 young teams. Tatnall starts a freshman quarterback. It's going to be an interesting game. Now, the winner obviously is probably going to get Laurel, but it's an accomplishment. Last year, Tatnall went to the semifinals, so they're looking for their second semifinal appearance. And when you're at this level and you've got St. Elizabeth's and Laurel in the same bracket, you're trying to get as far as you can. And whoever gets to the semifinals, that's a cap and feather in anyone's cap, regardless of what happens from that point on. So I think this is a real toss-up game.
All right, that's the top half of the bracket. Before we go to the bottom half of the bracket, I want to remind you, if you're looking for a real estate agent, Mary Kate Johnson of Remax Associates, please consider her. My wife and I hired her 16 years ago. She's an award-winning realtor with 20 years of experience now. She helped us every single step of the way, selling our one house and buying the new house that we are still in. We've since recommended her to dozens of friends who have done the same and heard nothing but rave reviews about her. Whether it's a first home, an upsize, downsize for you, your child, maybe a parent, make sure that you consider using Mary Kate Johnson of Remax Associates as your real estate agent. Her website is marykatej.remax.com. That's marykatej.remax.com. You can read about her multiple 5-star reviews and see and hear what other people have said about her. And if you end up hiring her to be your agent, let her know you heard about her on the podcast, and she will give you for free a 1-year home appliance warranty. She did that for my wife and I 16 years ago. We still use it to this day. It's paid off just about every single year. Again, it's marykatej.remax.com. All right, bottom half of the bracket. Number 2, St. Elizabeth versus number 7, Indian River. St. Elizabeth 9-1. Their only loss, week 10 of the season, to Caravel, 35-0. They have no wins closer than 26-0 of Tatnall, so they've just obliviated teams. The big question mark, Marty, is Kasim Benson. How healthy is it? I was at that Caravel game. I texted you 3 plays in and said he just limped off the field. I didn't expect to see him back. They brought him back. He played on defense. He was more of a decoy on offense, just a guy you could give it to. Wasn't himself, certainly. Not a long time to rest since that last game. So we will see what kind of shape he is in next week. Indian River, 5-5. 1 quality win against a playoff team. That was Seaford. 3 losses to playoff teams. So their losses have been legitimate, 3 out of the 5 of them at least. One of them was to this St. Elizabeth team. It was 39-14 when they faced each other. And Benson had 5 touchdowns. So I think that's going to be the difference maker here. If Kasim Benson is healthy, then I think St. Elizabeth is a heavy favorite. If he's not, this could be one of the upsets in the makings.
Yeah, it could be. This is interesting. I mean, Benson, he clearly was not himself for the rest of the game. As you said, I talked to somebody from St. Elizabeth, and they basically said the same thing, that he was more of a decoy, and they weren't really sure what was going on. I heard that he was very sore after the game and the day after. So hopefully he's going to be healthy. If he is, they're I don't see anything happening much different from the first time they met Indian River, as you said, when he went for 5 touchdowns. And I watched that game, and Indian River held in there for a little bit, but boy, Benson is just explosive. If he gets out on the edge, the speed and the quickness is just, it's unreal. Indian River, Phil Townsend's done a nice job there. The quarterback Dylan Grice thrown for 6 touchdowns. Bryce Johnson has a couple touchdowns on the ground. Hayden Hall is their big guy, 701 yards on the ground, 7 touchdowns. Hayden Hall is also one of their top guys on defense, which you see a lot, especially at the 1A level where the rosters are somewhat smaller than everywhere else. As you said, their losses, Odessa, St. E, and Laurel. I thought IR last year, remember, gave St. Elizabeth a real scare in the regular season. I believe they only lost by 1 point. Little quirk right here, right before I go on here too. The same 8 teams made the playoffs in 1A this year, and amazingly, statistically, this is hard to believe. Not one of the games is a rematch. They're all on. It's all mixed up again. So
that's
it's
a
amazing.
good thing.
Same 8 teams. It is. It is. This Indian River is going to keep this close, I think, if Benson can't play or is limited. Now, they still have Chris Character, St. Elizabeth. They still have Cole Soto. They don't throw the ball often, but when they do, they're pretty effective because of the running game. Chris Character has done a nice job taking advantage of that, as has Soto. This is going to be another real uphill battle. This is not a Laurel versus St. Andrews, but it's in the neighborhood. Right. It's a couple of streets over. Let's
healthy.
Put it that way.
Benson's healthy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. David's a little bigger in this one than in these Laurel St. Andrews ones. So at least there might be a little chance. But yeah, if Benson's healthy, this is a St. Elizabeth's win.
All right, so the winner of this game will face the winner of the Wilmington Charter Seaford game. Number 3, Wilmington Charter. Number 6, Seaford. Wilmington Charter 8-1. First time ever in school history they've won that many games. Again, that's one of the positive things about this 3-class system. There's excitement about football at Wilmington Charter for the first time, well, second time in history. They were in the playoffs last year, and that was exciting for them too. They have 2 wins versus playoff teams. Marty, I think this is I was trying to think, this might be the Cinderella team. For Wilmington Charter, they've got a legitimate shot to get to the state championship. Whether they can hang with Laurel or not, who knows? And you know what? They may not get there. They may not be able to hang with St. Elizabeth if they beat Indian River. But I think this is a team that everybody would root for. I think if Wilmington Charter plays St. Elizabeth, I think if you don't go to St. Elizabeth like you did, or don't, you're probably rooting for Wilmington Charter, not because it's anything against St. Elizabeth, but because what a great story it is for Wilmington Charter. And so I think that they're kind of the Cinderella team. They got 2 wins against playoff teams, as I mentioned. So they've got a couple quality wins at least. Seaford's 7-3. They beat Tower Hill. That's their one win against a playoff team, and Tower Hill's a class up. So it was not only a win against a playoff team, it was a playoff team in a class above you. They've got 3 losses to playoff teams. So again, you might look at that as a positive, that the losses were legitimate losses. And those losses, Marty, 1 point to Indian River is all they lost by, and 1 touchdown to Odessa. So again, that 7-3 record could easily be 9-1, and they're one of the top 3 seeds. And so this is the game I've kind of got asterisked as if I had to pick an upset, just strictly on the number 3 versus the number 6, this might be it. But again, people are rooting for Wilmington Charter because of the Cinderella team, unless you're in Seaford. Then you're rooting for Seaford, and that's a great town, and they're behind their football team.
Absolutely. I was going to say that the community spirit in Seaford is amazing, but they're going to have to bring that up to Wilmington Charter. This is along the same lines of Odessa. This is Wilmington Charter's first ever home playoff game. They're going to have that place filled. It's going to be at Saturday at noon. Charter, and part of the charm of Charter is their social media presence. They put so much stuff out there, the coaches, the players, and there's so much positivity, and you just feel like the whole culture of that school has been affected by the football program.
Right.
I saw some pictures. The News Journal did one of those photo dumps, and it was from one of Charter's home games. I believe it was their homecoming game. And it was crazy how filled the stands were with kids, and they were watching the game. It was incredible to see. So I think they're one of those teams that's, Coach Winnington has done a great job. Coach Hedrick, the defensive coordinator, has done an amazing job. This is a tough game. This is not a gimme by any means, because Seaford, as you said, they're 2 touchdowns away from a 9-1 season. Mark Quillen has done a phenomenal job down there. Kareem Bolden, 900 yards passing. Jazante Levon is their big guy, running back, 13 or close to 1,400 yards, 12 touchdowns. Avion Matthews is their big receiver, 602 yards, 8 touchdowns. Of course, for Charter, and again, the social media stuff they put out all the time. So I know these players, Roman Paoli, the quarterback, has done a great job, almost 1,400 yards, 61% completion, 17 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions. Tenai Martin, the running back, can do a little bit of everything, 700 yards rushing, 8 touchdowns. Danny Houston's their big wide receiver with 8 touchdowns. Tenai Martin and Menzies are their 2 big tacklers. They combine for almost 200 tackles. I think this is going to be one of the more fun games of the first round. Seaford's going to come up there. Again, it's an early game, 12 o'clock. They're going to have a long bus ride, but they've got a quality team, and Mark Quillen is going to have these guys ready. Coach Winnington will certainly have Charter ready. I agree. If I had to pick an upset, this would be it. But that's hard to say. If the game were at Seaford, I'd say Seaford would win this game. Charter at home, there just seems to be some magic to that program right now. And this is going to be a lot of fun.
Early morning for Seaford. That's a 2-hour bus ride. We were talking about Laurel. Seaford's just north of Laurel. So it's going to be a 2-hour bus ride. If you're planning to get there at 10 o'clock, you're leaving Seaford at 8, which means you're getting out of bed at 7.
That's right.
The good thing is they all live close to the high school. Everybody goes to Seaford can walk to the high school. So you don't have to get up and take a long car ride there. All right. So your opening games for Class 1A, St. Andrews at Laurel, Friday at 7 o'clock. Tatnall at Odessa, Saturday at 7 o'clock. Indian River at St. Elizabeth, Friday at 7 o'clock at Abyssinia Stadium. And Seaford at Charter of Wilmington on Saturday at 12 noon. As we mentioned, make sure you find out what the ticket policies are if you plan to go to the games. I would assume the schools will announce them no later than Tuesday by noon, because I know if they're going to be meeting tomorrow, whether it's with the DIAA or among themselves, as to what the school policies are going to be. The other thing I'll remind you and ask you to do is to double check the schedule. Although the DIAA football committee put this schedule out, athletic directors do have the right and sometimes will make slight changes. And that slight change might be a kickoff time It might be a day for whatever reason, because the
Right.
committee scheduled these without the input of the athletic directors and the head coaches. That's just the way it works. I'm on the unified committee. I chair that, and I know how that is. We schedule it based on what we think, and then they have the right to change it if there's a good reason to do so. So double check the schedules and double check the ticket policy, so you don't arrive with $5 in cash and realize that you needed to do it online by noon on Thursday.
And again,
there are
there's some long rides here. Don't make that long ride without knowing exactly what the ticket policy is, please.
Whoops, it's
Do
tomorrow.
yourself a favor. Yes.
Back to Seaford. All right. Then again, if you're looking for Class 3 and Class 2 playoff previews, we drop those podcasts separately for you. We hope you enjoy all three, but we also realize if you've listened to this point in Class 1, you're probably a Class 1 fan as well, and that's why we did it this way. We'll be looking for feedback from our listeners as to whether you like this or not. We can't wait for the weekend to arrive. First round of the playoffs in all three classes. There's no better time of year if you're a Delaware high school football fan. And that's what we do. And that's why we do this podcast. We appreciate you listening and hope that you continue to do so till the end of the season. Until then, he's Marty Sheehan. I'm John Buzby. Have a great sports week.